But yeah, let's jump right into it. So, The Rise of Skywalker, again, an opinionated moviegoer, not a film critic here watching this. That's your realm. But I like this movie. But again, I don't know if I loved the entirety of this movie or if I kind of found myself just getting really hyped up at the end and then coming away thinking it was fantastic.
Like it becomes a little bit about the climax of the movie and whether or not the rest of it is, as not meaningful, but I guess as impactful as
Definitely. So it's hard to talk about The Rise of Skywalker, I think, without also talking about the last two Star Wars movies that have come out and kind of the feud between Abrams
and the legacy
Johnson.
That the rest of the movies
exactly.
left behind too.
Exactly. And of course, the legacy of the rest of the movie was brought into this one. You still have characters like Lando, you've got Leia, Han, Luke in this. And of course, as you all know, in the ending, you're hearing a lot of voices from some heavy hitters.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to talk about that.
Up in the whole trilogy. Yeah, definitely. But yeah, let's kind of start out at the beginning. So this movie starts out fast, and I thought the intro or kind of the beginning of it was intense. You're seeing Kylo Ren fly through, I don't even know, like a planet, basically.
Yeah. So
and he's flying in.
And it's funny because you can see, if you watch The Force Awakens and you watch The Last Jedi, you see that there's a color palette, and this one jumps right into like, this is about the Sith. Like the planet he's on is red. Like the entire like first 5 minutes of the film, like the color palette is very much a Sith color palette, and I think that kind of paints the portrait for the rest of the film. And I think it's awesome. I mean, it's very visceral to watch, especially as he's like slow motion, like just massacring this population just to get this holocron. It's intense.
They start out intense, and it was a dark movie. You immediately are, we all kind of knew from watching the trailers way before this came out. Everyone heard Palpatine laugh in the trailer. He's going to be in this movie. Ian McDermott, his voice is pretty unmissable, but still
he does something very interesting with his voice. I don't know how he can speak so nobly. He sounds like a politician and like just a very distinguished person. And then he can also get that like really bassy, evil villain like going with his voice. It's really weird how he's able to control his voice like that. Yeah, he's incredible, and it's hard because he's such a phenomenal villain, and he's done so much for that saga. But I can't help but ask the question of, why is he the villain in this movie, and where is Snoke? And again, trying not to go back to the previous movie too much, but like seriously, like we're just supposed to accept that the villain of this movie, the closing of this saga, they're going back to Palpatine, and they're just, Snoke's really dead. Like he's gone. He's completely gone. You're just supposed to forget he even existed, basically. And Palpatine is going to be your villain to close out essentially this saga. I mean, that's just really what they're saying is that this main trilogy, this is it. This is the last movie. The whole time it was Palpatine behind the whole thing. Yeah.
Right, which raises so many questions. Like, first of all, how is he even alive? Who saved him? We got like, and again, as cool as he is, and as threatening as his voice is, you got like the Michael Vick experience Palpatine. Which, if you don't know what that is, look up that video after this. The Michael Vick experience. It's an old one, but you'll know what I'm talking about. He's like getting ridden around on this harness, basically. Which I don't know who the people are there helping him. I don't know, but we're just kind of supposed to accept it and go with it. And I did. I bought into it. But I mean, what do you think about Palpatine being the villain in this kind of closing to the saga?
It's kind of hard to decide whether or not it really was like George Lucas's master plan for the story, or if it's if it's their like attempt to kind of erase what happened in the last movie and call it their master plan. But as looks wise, I think he looked amazing. Like the actual like appearance of the villain, I thought was amazing, especially in that scene towards the end where you see him being kind of like lowered on that crane thing, and you just see all the wires and everything. Like visually stunning. The lighting in those scenes too, with the lightning flashing. You see his face from different profiles just because of the light is hitting it from different ways, and so you see shadow, like half shadow, and then you see his full face and. It really just shows you that this is a person of many faces. Like he was a senator, he was the villain, and now he's this like zombie thing. So it kind of portrays this image of this like endless villain that just won't die. And I think it's really cool. But I think if you're trying to create a new saga, a new wave of viewers that are gonna, be fans of the Star Wars films going on, moving forward, I think it feels a little bit like a cop-out to just have Palpatine be the villain. But at the same time, they're also trying to close that loop. And
I feel like and that's something I was going to bring up, is that I feel like they had no either direction or a master plan for what they were doing with these characters and who was going to be who. And it felt like in this movie, every character, you're like still trying to figure out who they are. And I think they do themselves a disservice in that, because I think we get a little bit less connected to these movies that way. Like, okay, Kylo Ren, for example. I feel like Kylo Ren, a lot of people, like in the first of the new trilogy, a lot of people were kind of dogging on Kylo Ren for, they thought he looked goofy, they thought he didn't fit the part. I thought he was awesome. Yeah, I think Adam Driver's really cool in that role. I honestly do. But I think they do such a disservice to that character by giving him like almost no backstory that's really shown. Like, I almost feel like we missed the coolest parts of Kylo Ren's story. Like, where is him training more with Luke?
And
where
to make him believable too, because he's
and
young.
You have to make him scary.
Exactly.
Right, he's young, and you have to make him intimidating too. Like, I'm not scared of this guy as like the main villain in this movie because he hasn't done anything to make me afraid of him. Like, he jumps out of the ship in the first of the new ones and stops like a blaster beam in midair, and that was insane.
That was awesome.
And you're thinking, okay, this guy's gonna be cool, and then he kind of doesn't do anything after that. You know what I mean? He's getting out-dueled by a Jedi who doesn't even have any training.
And if anything, he's just proving the Skywalker in him by just being whiny most of the movies.
Yeah, the whole movie.
Yeah.
And now I will say, coming off of the previous movie and into the Rise of Skywalker, coming off The Last Jedi and into the Rise of Skywalker, Kylo Ren was a pretty intimidating villain. After his duel with Luke, where he finds out he's using the Force Ghost and he puts his lightsaber through him, he's mad.
Oh, yeah.
And you can feel that. And I felt like that was kind of his climax of where he was as a villain. Now, obviously, when he comes in at the end as he's no longer Kylo Ren, he's Ben Solo, that's a redeeming moment, and that's probably one of his coolest
at the
moments.
end of The Last Jedi.
At the end of the Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
But as far as being a villain, I felt like he was at his peak at the very end of The Last Jedi, when he and Luke were kind of faced off in that mining planet, and he was mad. And I'm thinking, okay, he's going to come into this new movie, The Rise of Skywalker, with a vengeance. And he did in the beginning, but again, it just kind of fades out.
Yeah, and it makes sense, because if you're breaking the movies up into like a full story, you have the Force Awakens, which is Act 1, right? That entire movie essentially is Act 1 of the 1, 2, and 3 part of this new saga. And so you have Kylo Ren, and you have to establish what this new world is. We don't know anything about the First Order. We don't know anything about Rey, about these people, these characters, what happened to the old characters. So you have to establish all of that in The Force Awakens. And then The Last Jedi, we really want to see that crescendo of the villain, where at the end of the movie is really the climax of the villain. At the end of Act 2, the beginning of Act 3, is where you want to see how bad things have gotten, and the fact that your biggest savior in the Star Wars universe, where they've been looking for Luke for, years, it seems like, he's gone, and he's no longer there to help them, and now their only hope is Rey. And so that makes sense. You want to have the villain be on top at the end of the second movie, because it paints the direness of the situation for the next movie. And so I think that's why this movie starts so quickly. And then as a character arc, we really do see at the very beginning that Kylo Ren is lost. He's still young, and so we still feel for him because we don't see him faceless like we do Darth Vader. And even Palpatine in most of the movies, like, even though we see him in the film, he's not Palpatine, he's the Senator. It's not until the end of the original or the prequel trilogy that we see that, like, oh, this is the bad guy now, even though we all knew it. So I think it makes sense to start that character arc and build it in the second act, the second movie, and then bring in the humanity of Kylo Ren through Rey towards the end of the movie, to the point where at the very end of Rise of Skywalker, she doesn't, when she wakes up after dying, she doesn't say Kylo, she says Ben. It's the first time we hear her call him Ben. And so it's kind of like a solidifying moment that he is no longer Kylo Ren. He's redeemed himself and he can pass on. So
yeah, I feel like I think there was a struggle in the direction of this movie to decide how much of the old Star Wars they were going to keep and how much they wanted to just kind of wipe it and make it a new thing. And I think they kind of landed somewhere in a negative middle ground with a lot of these films because they held on to the older characters and kind of changed their stories, much to the lament of a lot of the true like Star Wars nuts. And look, like, I'm not coming in here claiming to be an expert on all things Star Wars. You know, I don't know all the theory. I don't know all of the background stories, and you know, I'm not a Star Wars aficionado, but I've watched all the movies numerous times. So I'm just a fan. I'm just a fan of Star Wars, you know. But if they're gonna remake these movies, I honestly think they should have done whatever they wanted to do with some of the original characters in the first of the new series and then let it go.
Yeah.
I think it's almost insulting to, not to Carrie Fisher, but to the original fans of Star Wars to just have her in this movie completely CGI'd the entire time. And to play such a small role, basically to be in this movie just to help Ben kind of see the light, if you will, when she kind of dies. And I guess I don't know what exactly happened there. Like her soul.
There's a lot of
force
theories.
Left her.
Yeah. There's...
Yeah.
But
and I don't know. But
did you know that Carrie Fisher's daughter is actually on set? Like, she's one of the actors.
Really?
Yeah.
No,
So she plays, I believe, and for those of you who are watching who actually know this, I believe her name is Beauregard, and she is one of the characters. So did you notice that Dominic Monaghan is in the cast? I mean, I'm sure you did. He played Merry in Lord of the Rings. He kind of hangs around with this girl in the movie in the background. She gets shot when they're on the Star Destroyer, and they have to like pull her back.
I'd have to watch it again.
Yeah.
To see.
So her daughter was in this,
it.
and she's the one that kind of gave the okay to use Carrie Fisher. And what they did was they used scenes that they shot in the previous movies, and then put in Rey on top of the actor who was originally having this scene, if I remember correctly. But basically, they composited two different scenes together to create a scene where Carrie Fisher's in it. But it was Carrie Fisher's daughter who gave the okay, saying, my mom would have wanted this. So that's kind of sweet.
Gotcha.
You know, it's nice. There's a lot of nods to the original films, which I think they were trying to use to the benefit of closing the loop and saying, like, we're done with this. And I think one of the biggest points of the film where this is proven is, like, literally at the very end, you have the burying of Luke and Leia, where Rey puts the lightsabers into the ground on Tatooine, and she covers them in sand. And that is, I think, a way for the directors and for the writers and everybody to say, we're putting this to rest. Luke and Leia are done. The Skywalkers are done. This is it. We're moving forward with something new. And I think that's beautiful imagery, and especially to end it on the original planet where we first saw Luke. And that same shot with the two suns.
It was incredible. Yeah, it was an incredible way to wrap it up. I just think they could have done that maybe in The Force Awakens. And look, it's nothing against any of the actors. They're all phenomenal. Carrie Fisher, you know, rest her soul, she's incredible. She's an icon and a legend in those series. I just think that they were trying to hold on to the original kind of diehard fans of Star Wars by keeping her in these movies, even after she'd passed away, and keeping her in as CGI, when they had probably one of the coolest moments in the whole saga, in the new saga at least, in the whole saga, I think, when, I don't even remember her name now, turns the ship around and blasts it through Snoke's ship going light speed.
Last Jedi, yeah.
That absolutely could have been Leia doing that. And I mean, what a way to go out. And I was surprised they didn't take that direction.
That. I actually think that would have been a great way for her.
Yeah, I was just kind of surprised they didn't go that way, because it's like, okay, well, now you're going to keep her around for a whole nother movie. It's got to be more work on them to try to, you know, CGI her in and to try to collect her voice lines. I know nothing about that. I don't know how they do that, but it can't be easy. It can't be easier than not having her in the movie.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And so they bring her in. But, dude, like, even the other characters that they're trying to save from the old movies, it just, I think it just kind of waters down the story of the new people. Like, they bring Lando in this one. He's a big movie, but dude, they they find him at like the squid Burning Man going on in the middle of the desert, and he's in like a hippie van. Wookiee, stand out in the crowd, man. Like, get in my bus. And he, like, you know what I mean? It's like, seriously? Like, we all love these characters. Like, dude, that's like, good. What else do you want? Like, it's just a rager in the desert. They're playing music.
I love
those
choreography
creepy babies.
That scene, by the way. I think that scene is well done. It's a little weird. I don't know. I think what works best for that is the fact that they're all doing this really cool choreography with the flowing clothing and everything. I think it's awesome, but it also, again, serves very little purpose to the story, in my opinion.
Right, and like they basically brought him there. And I mean, I know they get sucked in. Like, okay, so if you guys remember, they get sucked into that sand pit, which is where, I just watched this one not too long ago for this podcast, but before that, I probably would have had a little bit of hard time remembering this because it all gets tangled together. But they go there because they're tracing where Luke was to try and find this wayfinder. They get sucked into that sand pit, which is where they find this dagger, which was very convenient, by the way, that they even landed in that sand pit.
I've got notes on that. Yeah.
Yeah, like, dude, what, like, but also, those new, like, snowmobile desert speeders that the stormtroopers had were badass. Yeah. Those things were awesome. So, they're, like, catapulting the troopers off of them.
So here's a note for you. It's actually something that I wrote as something that works against the films, and that they all do. Every single one does this. And I don't know, maybe it's because it's a big galaxy and galaxies are huge or whatever, but I hate that they always, every movie, introduce some sort of new technology that, for whatever reason, wasn't in the previous ones.
Never previously existed.
Show us some continuity in the technology and in the universe, because it keeps getting bigger, but none of it feels connected. Right. like if you look at the original trilogy, those movies take place over the course of like 2 planets per movie, maybe.
Right.
And then the prequels, they've add a few more planets. You've got Coruscant, you've got Naboo, you have all these other planets. But then there's more and more planets, and now it feels to me like in these movies that they're just going to planets just to put a new setting in, when it really doesn't have anything to do with the story. Like, they went to this planet to find this dagger, which was, again, conveniently placed, and also a weird dagger.
Right, they didn't even know they were looking for that.
Right, and so that's weird. And then they just leave the planet. And the only it's like they dropped the thing that needs to push the story along into this planet. But that's it. Like, the planet itself serves no purpose. They could have easily done it on any other planet.
Right, and I guess that's supposed to be the Force, right? Like, what's guiding them through this. Like, I think you're supposed to just kind of accept. And look, I mean, come on, we're talking about movies where people have lightsabers and are flying through space. Like, there's gonna be some of it that you're just gonna have to accept. There's gonna be some of it that you're thinking, no freaking way. Like, okay, they land in the sand pit. It's pretty convenient, but name honestly any movie that really doesn't have like at least a little bit of that Force convenience, especially a Disney or a Marvel or something like that.
Suspending your disbelief.
Yeah, exactly.
Clark Kent, when he's wearing the glasses, nobody recognizes him, but he takes them off. He's Superman. It's that. You're willing to look past it for the sake of the story, and I understand. I'm not saying the movie's bad because I thought the movie was good. I really enjoyed the ending, for sure. I mean, that whole sequence at the end, the climax, the battle was awesome. Like, I think...
Yeah, it was incredible. It was super dark, and it was super intense, and that's kind of what people want. And the problem was that the other 95% of the movie, when you go back and watch it, isn't that. And I think, okay, so... Going back to, I was just saying that I think they're doing a disservice by trying to hold on so tightly to the characters in the original trilogy. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, it's cool to see them, and I'm glad they were in it, but I think that if you go back and watch The Force Awakens, the first of the new ones, I actually think that the moment you start getting introduced to the older characters is the same moment that this whole trilogy kind of starts to go downhill. You're just getting into Finn and Poe and Rey, and the three of them actually have incredible chemistry together in those movies. Like, yeah, and that was one thing, like Finn and Poe, because they spend a lot of The Rise of Skywalker separated from Rey, they've got awesome chemistry, and they're really cool to like watch interact, and they're funny. Like, I actually found myself laughing at them, or with them or whatever in these movies a good bit. But the chemistry between Finn and Poe and Rey and Chewie and Lando and Leia, it's just a lot. It's a lot to kind of force on people. There's a big age difference, and I think they were trying to hold on to these people to get the original diehard fans to go to the movies and see these and like them and accept them. I don't even know if it was to like them, but at least to accept them. But then you've also got a lot of people who I think are just going to these movies because it's kind of the popular movie out right now. I think if you went to a lot of people who watch this, 90% of the people, maybe not 90%, but at least 50% of the people who watch this movie, if you ask them, like, you know, name some of the newer characters from Star Wars, they probably couldn't do it.
Yeah.
They could probably tell you Finn and Poe and Rey. But, like, okay, for example, just another example of why I think there's too many people in these movies. You probably do, Chris, because I know we just watched this not that long ago. But to the people watching this right now, honestly, what is the name of the chick that Finn met who's riding the horse? What is her name?
The Stormtrooper?
The, like, ex-Stormtrooper.
Yeah. I know her name. Her name is Janna.
Yeah, you know her name, but you're a freaking film critic, and you also, you know, you're a big Star Wars person. But I think a lot of people probably don't remember.
Oh, yeah.
And what was the name of the chick that Poe is, like, in love with?
Oh, I don't remember her name.
Yeah, like, dude, we just watched this movie, man, because it's like we're what, 9 films deep? It's too much.
They're saturating it, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, they're saturating it with characters that we just don't care about. Yeah, we don't care because we have no backstory whatsoever. What is the name of? Okay, what's the name of the chick with the butthole eyes who runs that cantina?
What?
It's Maz.
Maz.
Do you remember
the
her?
Butthole eyes? Is that...
Yeah, dude. I mean, come on. What else can you even call it? But, like, I guess I'm just trying to prove a point that, like you said, they're oversaturating these movies with characters that we have no backstory on and we're supposed to care about.
I actually really like
we're
Maz.
Supposed to.
She has that, like...
I do too. No, I do too. But, you know, and she stuck around for a couple movies.
Yeah.
I like her, and she's got a cool kind of backstory, and she played a more integral role in these movies, and she stuck around. But, dude, like, they're still introducing new characters, and, like, freaking Finn is supposed to be in love with, I think, is supposed to be in love with that chick who, like, rides the horse.
Yeah, so
that
was actually one of my things I was going to ask you. I've got a couple questions here for you before we wrap it up. But yeah, you're right. And I think the biggest disservice they did to all the movies was to have multiple directors.
Yeah, I think so. And I think I'm assuming that was never their intention.
Yeah, well, I mean, why bring the director from the first one to the last one if you're not going to have him in the third, like in the middle?
Right.
It just doesn't make sense to me. It creates a lack of continuation with the artistic direction, and I think it really should have been one person who directed the films who knew what he was, who knows the story and loves the story. There's plenty of people, like you look at The Mandalorian. Jon Favreau, I think, would have done a great job directing these movies. He's a huge fan of the Star Wars movies.
Yeah, everything he touches turns to gold, honestly. And I've loved Jon Favreau. I'm a Notre Dame fan, so since Rudy, which I don't even know if you've seen it, it's a sports movie from way back. I've been watching that since I was a little tiny kid. So I've always been a big fan of Favreau and everything he's done recently, including stuff that is nowhere near Star Wars. I don't know if you saw the movie Chef. We won't go into that now.
I don't.
But it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal. That would be one I would definitely recommend anybody at home watches. I think it's on... I can't even keep up now. I don't know. It's on something. I don't know if it's on Hulu or if it's on Prime or Netflix, but almost everybody has at least 3 of them nowadays, so check it out. But yeah, he's phenomenal. I think he would have been incredible to come in and do all of them, definitely.
Yeah, and now J.J. Abrams did Force Awakens, and then I believe it was Rian Johnson, right, who did the
Rian Johnson,
The Last Jedi. Now, I actually think Rian Johnson's a fantastic director. But maybe there was a lack of love there for the Star Wars movies. I'm not sure what happened there. Last Jedi. I don't know what happened. Literally just a lack of.
It's a big ask, man. To be told, hey, here's
true.
Like probably one of the if not the biggest movie sagas ever. You've got fans it's completely polarizing that we're even doing this movie.
Yep.
Half of the people don't even want it done. The other half are excited. And even the people that do want it done have like extremely firm opinions of how they think it should be done. Here you go. Good luck.
And then you
Figure
have the fact
out.
that because Disney bought it, there's people who already hate it because there's people who hate Disney. And then
yeah, that's true.
And then on top of that, the fact that Disney bought it, and then all of the works of fiction that had been created up to that point, where you have the entire sections in the bookstores that are just Star Wars, all of that, they said none of this is canon.
Yeah, not doing it. We're not
you know,
doing
and
any of the extended universe, anything.
But I think that like there really was like a huge polarizing of different audiences, many different audiences, and so to take on the task of directing a Star Wars film was I think a huge undertaking, especially when you're having to follow up somebody like J.J. Abrams, who's considered one of the best directors, one of my favorite directors for sure. So, I mean, yeah, I'm not saying that Rian Johnson did a terrible job. I think The Last Jedi was enjoyable for entertainment, but it's hard to follow that up. And then, I mean, yeah, there's just a lot of different things that could have gone wrong. That, you know, then they tried to fix here in The Rise of Skywalker. Now, I mentioned that they were doing a lot of nods. So, like, if you consider those three movies, the Force Awakens, Last Jedi, and this one, Rise of Skywalker, as one story arc, just like the prequels and the originals, they had a lot of nods to the original films, and I think it's kind of important to know that they went into this understanding that this is the last of it. Like, I don't believe that C-3PO and R2-D2 and any of them are going to be in any of the future movies. I think this is it for those characters. I think they're going to start building on new characters, like characters that we've seen in Rebels or Clone Wars, characters that are off to the side.
Mandalorian even.
Yeah, exactly. And so there's a lot of different nods to the original movies that I think they did in this one, specifically to try and connect with the originals to kind of create, like I've said it like the third time now, like they create, it finishes the loop of all of the Star Wars movies that they've made. When C-3PO gets his memory erased, and you hear for the first time in probably like several movies where he says, you know, my name is C-3PO. Human cyborg relations, you know, like, and that's a nod in itself. You know, you have Palpatine again. It's one of those things where, you know, like, why is he in this? But I think that's again an attempt to try and close the loop and try and fit this in with the prequels and the originals. Because if you think about it, he is in all of them except for this saga here. And also the training, Rey's training, is a good parallel when she's in the jungle. It's a good parallel to when Luke was training in the originals on Dagobah. They're both in this like lush green jungle, and they're both trying to do the best they can without an actual,
that's true,
you know, mentor. You know, you have Yoda in the originals, but like he's gone a little crazy at that point. He's old, you know, to the point where he dies just after Luke, you know, completes his training.
Right.
But yeah, and it's funny because I think that C-3PO specifically kind of embodies the theme of the entire movie of this one, of Rise of Skywalker, which I think is friendship. I think the entire movie is about friendship and about multiple times they say how the Empire wins by making us feel like we're alone. And so C-3PO making that sacrifice to get his memory erased, even though he doesn't want it, like he's actively against it. He decides, you know what, I have to do this because it's the only way for the Resistance to win. That sacrifice, I think, is a nod to the idea that, you know, friendship has to be stronger than evil. On top of that, you know, you have all of these new people that come into the movie at the very end. You know, with the climax when all of the ships come in, they say, you know, like, well, how they don't have a navy? How are they doing this? And they say they're just people.
Right, it's just people.
It's just people, and I think that in itself is really the embodiment of the entire film. That you're never going to do something if you're alone. And it isn't until Kylo Ren realizes that he's not alone, that he has all these people that care about him and that he's really in the fault, when his mother makes that sacrifice and dies for him, that he realizes that he's in the wrong. And that's the moment that it starts to shift. And it really, I mean, it's a metaphorical and literal death of his character, because he didn't die, but he died. You know, he, like, if his mom hadn't given the Force to him, he would have died. Like, he got a lightsaber through the gut. And so it really is like the shedding of his old skin and moving into what his character is supposed to become, which is ultimately like a sacrifice for the greater good.
Right. For the Jedi, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Kylo Ren, obviously, is a full Force user, right? I mean, he's wielding a lightsaber, he's using the Force, like I was saying, he's stopping blaster shots. And then, I guess in this one, Finn is also Force sensitive, I suppose, is kind of where they're going with that.
Yeah, so here's one of the questions that I had for you. I'll jump to that one. That was my next one. But yeah, they mentioned multiple times, and not just him, but pretty much all of the stormtroopers. that were on that planet with Janna. With on I don't think it was actually Endor, but it was one of Endor's moons. But she said that all the stormtroopers, her entire company, abandoned the First Order because they all had a feeling.
Yeah, it was all based on a feeling.
And so there's a theory that these were Force-sensitive kids who were forced to be stormtroopers who then realized that they were in the wrong. And so do you believe that Finn or the stormtroopers, all of them, or only a few of them, do you believe they're Force-sensitive, or is that something that people are just wanting? Because there's evidence that, it says that Finn was Force-sensitive in the earlier films too.
I think I think that's exactly what they were going for. I think if you try to tell me that they weren't moving in the direction of saying that Finn and whoever else is Force sensitive, I mean, at the end of, gosh, I'm getting them all confused now. It's like they couldn't have named them a little more like indistinctly. But at the end of The Last Jedi, it was The Last Jedi where you see the kid who's like in the stable, like force the broom into his hand.
Yeah.
So it's not a secret that there's more people who are Force capable or have the Force with them somehow than just, these main characters that they've created for us. Mm-hmm. But again, they're trying to get us, that's supposed to be a detail that they're telling us about Finn so that we'll like buy into his character more. And they tell us with like an hour left in the last movie of the series. Like, where is that information in the Last Jedi or, the Rise of Skywalker? Where is that? Mm-hmm. They're missing that. And then they're trying to throw it at you at the end. And I don't know what they're expecting. Like when okay, Finn's kind of Force sensitive. Well, cool. But this is the last time we're ever going to see him. So it's awesome that this guy maybe is kind of Force sensitive, but like, thanks for telling us he had a feeling in the last movie of this series that we're even going to watch. It's like, who cares? It's over.
So that kind of leads into the next question I had for you, which is when they're sinking into the pit in the sand on the Aki planet. I can't remember what it's called, but the people are called the Aki. But they're sinking into the pit there, and he says, "Rey, I never told you," and then he doesn't get it out. He's not able to finish because they both sink. Do you think he was going to confess his love for her, or do you believe he was going to say, "Hey, by the way, I think I'm also Force sensitive"? Because there's people who see it both ways. There's people who want them to be together. And I'm one of the ones that actually sees a romantic connection between them many times throughout the movies. But then they kind of just get rid of it in The Last Jedi. And then in this movie, they just skip over what happened in The Last Jedi. They're like, hey, by the way, Rose kissed him, but, he got, like, we're not really sure what happened there. Because, the only interaction we see between Rose and Finn is, like, she comes up to him like, hey, if you guys get back, and he's like, when? And that's all we get. It's like this, like, hey, buddy, like pat on the shoulder, and then they never interact again until the battle.
Yeah, I think, dude, this movie was so hard to keep up with relationship-wise. It was like a love octagon going on in this movie because you got Finn, who I thought from the get-go from the first one was supposed to be the romantic interest of Rey.
Well, he even mentioned
it seemed like they were
in The Force Awakens. He says, like, "Do you have a boyfriend?" Like that's hinting.
Yeah, like you got a boyfriend, cute boyfriend, and what. Right, like, okay, so, like, they're into each other, which is great. Like, I like that. I like the chemistry. Then like you said, they kind of pull away from that. And then Rey kissing Kylo at the end, I thought that was so unnecessary.
Came out of nowhere.
I thought that was so unnecessary.
I mean,
I
think it's sweet, but it felt a little forced.
It felt a little, no pun intended, it felt a little bit forced for sure. They, I don't know, dude. And it's like, so they have this weird tension throughout the whole movie. Like, obviously we know they're kind of joined somehow. They're like seeing each other through these Force visions, not even seeing, they're interacting with each other. Like they're like physically fighting and like ripping necklaces off each other and stuff. And like, so clearly they have some sort of a binding thing going on. And, Palpatine says they're like a dyad in the Force. Okay, fine. But I didn't really take it as it was like love, like these two were going to be in love, and I don't even know if that's what that kiss was supposed to be, like I love you kind of thing, or if it was just I don't know. I guess maybe that's what they were going for. But yeah, it's like, so Poe is supposed to be now all of a sudden interested in this. What was it? Was it Zuri? The chick that Poe's in love with? So he's supposed to be in love with her. And we have no backstory on her. Could not care less about that character. Like, she shows up at the end. I mean, yeah, I guess, like, she would have been cool, if we had seen her 3 movies ago, and now we're seeing her, like, a more developed version of her. But, like, she shows up at the end when, everyone's making their little there are more of us, and Lando comes,
Yeah.
popping on screen, and she's like, "Whoa, Spice Runner," and she comes flying out. It's like, okay, but like, I'm not like, I wasn't clapping. It's not like the whole audience was like cheering. It wasn't like, Peter Parker swinging in Endgame at the end. Like, it wasn't like that, man. Like, you're not connected to these characters.
I cared more about the fact that Lando was back with the Millennium Falcon and all these people.
Exactly. Shit, I cared more about that ship. I cared more about the Millennium Falcon being there than I cared about half of those people that they had just introduced in this movie. Like, you're just not connected. I don't know. Maybe that's a question for you. Like, is it the physical aging of these characters in real life that may be kind of like turning people away from seeing them? Because I didn't feel like 3PO or R2 or Chewie were out of place in these films, but you don't notice aging on them. You don't notice any difference. They're kind of timeless in that sense. Like, I don't really know exactly how long a Wookiee's lifespan is. I'm pretty sure it's pretty long, if I remember correctly. And not like not like Yoda or anything like that. But like, you don't see them aging. You see Mark Hamill aging. You don't really see Ian McDermott aging because they pretty much had Palpatine looking like he was a million years old anyway. So he was cool. But you see Leia aging, and you see Han aging. And these, Lando, these characters that they're bringing in from the old movies, do you think that the physical aging of these characters is what's kind of turning some people off to them even being there? Because it's almost like they just seem a little out of place. I
think it's more about the being out of place in the story than it is about their physical appearance, because I wouldn't mind seeing Luke or Leia or Han if it served a real purpose to the story, but the only real purpose they served in the story was like, I fathered Ben Solo and I have to train Rey, when I think it would have been cool to like meet, like Disney has set up throughout their series that there are other Jedi that are still alive that we have yet to see on screen. And I don't know if, I know you've seen some of the Clone Wars, but I've seen Rebels, Clone Wars, I've seen it all, and there's several, and the Fallen Order. You played that, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you have Cal Kestis, which we assume is still alive, and also interestingly enough, he is not one of the voices we hear at the end.
Yeah, I noticed that they drew in some voices at the end from some of the people from the Clone Wars, right?
And Rebels. And
Rebels.
Yeah, you have Kanan, who is, I believe, one of the coolest characters in the series, in the Star Wars world. So you bring him into this, you bring all these other characters, but you're still not willing to let go of these other characters that like really serve no purpose to the story other than like, hey, we're bringing them back. I don't think it's
exactly
aging, but I think it's just the fact that, yeah, you're right, it does feel a little out of place, and they could do the same story with new characters.
It just feels unnecessary. It feels like they're bringing them in to hold on to the diehard Star Wars fans that probably don't even think they should be making these movies anyway. You know what I mean? And they're holding on to these characters, and they're trying to market these new people for us to love. But I have two qualms with a lot of movies nowadays, and you've heard me say this before, and anybody watching, if you keep watching some of these episodes, you're going to hear me say this now, you're going to hear me say this again, because I think it's relevant. I think nowadays in a lot of these big movies, and this isn't the only problem, but I think they try to bring too many characters into a lot of these movies, and I think they also try to make them too funny. I think they're doing a serious disservice to these movies by trying to bring comedy in at some really stupid times.
Yeah, like when they're being chased.
And they end up making...
in this one.
Yeah, when they're being chased,
like
or like, okay, dude, prime example. So Kylo Ren is hosting the like classic meeting at the table where he's going to force choke somebody who says something stupid. I don't know why anybody's even going to these round table meetings anymore. But dude, and like, okay, if you watch any of those meetings where Vader does that, where he does the force choke, nobody's laughing. Nobody's making jokes. That's not a funny moment in the movie. And yet in Rise of Skywalker, Kylo Ren walks in and he's got the Knights of Ren, which another set of characters that I'm not intimidated by. It's a bunch of... Dude, it's a bunch of goth dudes with like scimitars and stuff that don't even look that scary. Like she has a freaking lightsaber, dude. You got a piece of metal. Like, we're not scared of these characters. You don't see them do anything other than arrest Chewie, which is not like stormtroopers have done that multiple times throughout the saga.
And they're constantly being barked orders at, but there's they don't do anything. They follow them to all these planets and do nothing.
They do nothing, and we have no backstory on these people at all. Like, that's why I'm saying, like, Kylo Ren being one of the most underwhelming characters. But, again, going back to my point, I think they try to make these movies too funny. Like, Kylo Ren goes into this meeting room, and he's talking about the spy, and freaking Jason Statham speaks up and gets slammed into the ceiling. Go back and watch that clip. That dude is literally a Jason Statham.
Okay, I thought you were saying 100%. He's literally the actor?
No, he's not actually in the movie, but he may as well be. Dude,
you should have seen my face.
Exactly
I was like, wait,
him.
what?
You're like, wait, what? No, he says something stupid. I don't even know. And of course, like, they got to up the ante. Like, you can't just choke him anymore. He's got to fucking choke slam him into the ceiling. You know what I mean? But, like...
Got to make him seem more powerful.
Yeah, exactly. But they're doing Kylo Ren a serious disservice, in my opinion, when they make people laugh in his presence. Mm-hmm. Nobody's laughing around Vader. Nobody, except for maybe, like, Han Solo or somebody who you love because they're ballsy enough to do that. Dude, you're not going to get us to buy into Kylo Ren being this intimidating, scary guy when people are, like, laughing around him. And I think they do that throughout a lot of these movies, especially the new ones. If you watch them back, I think there's some parts in the movies that are actually really funny. I think there's a lot of dynamic between Finn and Poe that actually had me laughing. They're funny. And, of course, C-3PO's hilarious in all these movies. That's just his character.
Babu Frig.
I also think... Dude, Babu Frig was one of my favorites. He's, like, one of the only people I'm okay with them adding in. Yeah. He's awesome. Yeah. But, you know, he's not an integral part. I mean, he's important to the story, but he's not like a main character of the story.
He supports
the Rey doesn't fall in love with him. You know what I mean? Like, he's not kissing Rey at the end of the movie. Like, it's a different kind of thing. But I think they try to bring too many characters in, and I think they try to make it too funny. And I think this film was no exception.
It just felt a little forced at times.
Yeah, I thought the humor seemed forced at times, and I thought that there were just so many characters in this that I couldn't even hardly tell you their names now, and we're supposed to be totally invested in them while we're watching this. I'm just not buying it. And I think you can say that to a lot of movies, and this is one of them.
So my last question, I guess, is what do you think the title, The Rise of Skywalker, is a reference to?
I mean, it's got to be a reference to the fact that Rey is kind of taking the helm as a Skywalker, right? I mean, she's not Skywalker by blood, but she was essentially she was raised in the desert, but she was essentially trained and in contact with a Skywalker, which I don't know. It seems almost a little bit disrespectful to Luke, the fact that she like comes in and does this, because Luke already killed Palpatine. Well, I guess technically Vader threw him off, right? Vader threw Palpatine off the thing, but Luke already like defeated Palpatine. He was the chosen one. He was supposed to be and this is nothing new. Like, a lot of people have said this, but Luke was supposed to be the guy that comes in and destroys Palpatine. So let Rey be the Jedi that comes in and defeats Snoke and this new enemy. But again, to bring Palpatine back in to try and grab some of the original fans of Star Wars, I think you end up just pissing people off. Yeah. Because now you've got her who, to go to your question, who I guess is supposed to be the new Skywalker. She's supposed to be the new main Jedi in all of this. She's now the one that actually defeats Palpatine. It's kind of a slap in the face to Luke a little bit. It's like, hey, you know that whole saga you went through and all those people who died and you got your hand cut off? Like, yeah, well, you didn't do it. You didn't finish the job. And now
messed up real bad.
Right, now here's this chick with like almost no training. Well, I guess a little bit at this point. She's been getting trained by Leia, so fair enough. But now here's somebody who, you know, is going to come in and finish the job. Yeah. Do what you couldn't do. Sorry, dude. But yeah, I think The Rise of Skywalker, the title is just alluding to the fact that Rey is now the new Luke, basically. She rises up at the end. I mean, do you think, when you say that, do you think it could mean anything different?
I think that it's a reference to Kylo Ren's character, who's technically a Skywalker.
Ooh. Yeah,
because you know you have this character who's a fallen character. You know, he's an enemy that was supposed to be a Jedi, but because of some really messed up circumstances and a big misunderstanding that they for whatever reason couldn't communicate through, he just turned dark and decided to cast away his name. But he is a Skywalker. You know, he's got a Leia's blood in him, and so I think it's a reference to his character arc and his sacrifice for what's to become what Rey will eventually, I believe, create the new Jedi Order.
Yeah, and I guess that's supposed to be where we're going to go with it, but I don't think we're ever going to know, because like you said, I think they're going to, I think that's it. I think the Star Wars that we see now will either be something like The Mandalorian, where it's an independent kind of separate series.
With 0 lightsabers.
Or they're going to have to, with 0 lightsabers.
Oh, no, that's a lie. There was a dark saber in there, yeah.
Okay, that's another thing, man. The lightsaber, especially in this new trilogy, has got to be one of the most underutilized weapons in film ever. How many lightsaber battles do we even see in this movie? Like 2, maybe 3. Like, the bulb is not going to burn out on it, dude. Like, let them fight a little bit. Like, it's okay. Like, I feel like they are so hesitant to actually have cool battles between Jedi and Sith, and Maybe it's because there's so few of them left. They can't afford to be like killing people off.
I think it's because they're afraid of not living up to the expectation of the Darth Maul battle, because that one was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought at the end, the only time where I thought it would have been appropriate to have more characters brought back from the older movies was in the end, when you're starting to hear the voices. I thought it would have been pretty cool, and I think it was a pretty straightforward thing for Palpatine to call on some of the cooler Sith. Like maybe if you had seen like Force Ghosts of Maul and Dooku and some of these Sith that are just a little bit more like intense. Mm-hmm. I think that would have been pretty cool to at least see.
Yeah.
Like you're gonna bring, you've already got Luke in this, and you're gonna bring the voices of everybody. You know what I mean? You're gonna bring the voices of Vader and Anakin. Well, same person, but young Anakin, and then Vader and Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon. You're bringing all these people into this. Why not show us some Force Ghost of like Darth Maul? Mm-hmm. And if you're scared to bring him into it, because you think you're not going to do justice, then what do you think is going on with all these other characters that you're bringing back into this movie? Because I think it's the same kind of thing. Like, you're not really doing these characters justice in these movies, but you're bringing them in. Why not bring in the characters that I think people want to see a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely, I agree.
But, hey. So, The Rise of Skywalker, it got a 52% critic rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
Really?
And it got an 86% from the audience score. So, I am not a huge fan of Rotten Tomatoes. I don't think it's always spot on. Mm-hmm. But so what would you give it from a critic perspective? And then I'll tell you what I would give it, I suppose, as just a fan of the films.
I like the use of color. I think the cinematography was great. There were some epic shots. When you see Kylo Ren approaching the big temple, the symmetry of that, the use of the colors of his lightsaber versus the contrasting, dark backgrounds and stuff. The cinematography, I think, was great, which is expected, with a director like him. The story was a little lacking. It felt a little forced at times. Again, the use of the dagger, like, why use the Death Star as the marking point, as the X marks? It could fall at any point, sink into the ocean. The dagger becomes useless. The holocron's lost. You could have easily changed that. Right. It just felt a little too fortuitous. The Knights of Ren were a bad guy. Like, one of the rules in filmmaking is if you're going to show a gun in a film, you pull the trigger at some point. And I feel like they missed that. They didn't pull the trigger on the Knights of Ren in any of the films, even though they were supposed to be these incredible knights. I didn't like the use of the Final Order. Like, come up with a better name. Like, I didn't like that. Like, yeah. Other than that, the comedy was a little forced. Overall, the story was enough for it to be entertaining. It was enough for it to be Star Wars. So on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say that it's somewhere in between a strong 7.5 and an 8 for me. That's
I'm actually, I'm impressed to hear you say that. I thought you were going to come in a little bit lower, but I mean, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. And me, just as a fan, I liked this movie, but again, when you watch it back, you almost feel like you're watching this movie for the last 30, 40 minutes. Yep. And it may not even be quite that long. You're watching this movie to see Palpatine blast lightning into the sky and everything slows down and it's visually insane. And I thought visually this was an incrable movie. Mm-hmm. Everybody
and that's the
cool.
only
the
reason I gave
cool.
it the score that I did, because if the directing had been off, if the acting was bad, because there are some touching moments, especially when Leia dies, and just even though there's no lines from him, Chewie falling to his knees and the agony in his cry, dude, it hurts. So
it was powerful.
It's there were good moments in the movie. It does fit into the universe, but it just doesn't feel like the Star Wars movie that they wanted it to be, and that's the only reason that I give it a little lower of a score.
Yeah, and it probably wasn't the Star Wars movie that Abrams wanted it to be. I mean, he made some bold moves just to get it back on his tracks with this. I mean, Snoke's dead now, so there's a character that was introduced and supposed to be the villain. Like, that's a huge thing in a movie, man, to take the main villain and just say, no, they're dead.
Yeah,
sorry,
out of nowhere.
Figure something else out. Yeah, that's intense. So now he's almost forced to create loopholes in the story by trying to bring somebody back.
And I think that's the real disservice to the entire trilogy is that you had different directors who did not agree. The writing was off, and so you have this film that was as good as it could possibly be.
Yeah, I agree. I think watching it again, it kind of has Endgame syndrome where you kind of are getting through the whole movie just because the ending is so good and so intense. And I liked the movie. I thought there were some really cool parts in the movie. I thought the acting from a lot of the main characters was phenomenal. I think Adam Driver is actually an incredible actor. I thought Daisy Ridley did a phenomenal job. And I thought a lot of the characters, Poe, Finn, did really well. I thought the lines for C-3PO were funny, and I enjoyed it. I definitely remember coming out of theaters immediately thinking, this was the best of the three.
Yeah,
and even after watching it again, I still think it was the best of the three. And I liked it. So as just someone who's watching this because it's a Star Wars movie and trying to kind of ignore the loopholes in it, I'm going to give this movie a 7. I'm going to give this movie a 7. I liked it. It had an awesome ending. Maybe the ending bumps it up to an 8. You know, it just depends on how much you're willing to look past some of the other stuff.
I mean, the climax
but I think
has
they
that
tried to bring
emotion
in,
to it.
Right.
You know, to see, you know, like, Poe in this moment of despair where, you know, he's like, I let everybody down. I thought we were going to have something here. We were probably going to lose. He's watching all of his friends get shot down. And then to just see that beautiful imagery of all of those ships. I mean, my jaw dropped in the theater. That was absolutely stunning. To see that many ships just appear out of hyperspace, I was like grabbing the edge of my seat at that time. But if that's all the movie has going for it, then it's, you know, there's something missing. So
yeah, I'm gonna stick with my gut and give it a 7. And some people are gonna love that, some people are gonna hate that, but it is what it is. So comment down below if you're still with us. Let us know what you would give it out of a scale of 1 to 10, and if you guys loved it or hated it. And that's it. It's on Disney Plus again, so go watch it. We're all stuck at home anyway, so there's nothing better to do. Chris, you got anything else for the Rise of Skywalker?
No. I mean, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I'll throw that at the end. I love Star Wars, and I don't feel like I wasted my money, if that's any.
Yeah.
You know. So, I mean,
that's
all I got for that.
It was a good movie.